Assalamu alaikum and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, where we broadcast to 57 million people throughout USA and Canada, Mexico included. We're also on OTT devices like Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku. Or you can simply download our app, Muslim Network TV, on your iPhone and Android to remain connected. Our website is muslimnetwork.tv. There was a bombing in Nashville, Tennessee on a Christmas Day early in the morning. And this morning when I check news, it's hardly a news. It has almost disappeared from the media. It terrorized the whole Nashville on a Christmas day, injured 3 people, and caused structural damage to at least 41 buildings. And one of that building, in the historic district of Nashville, was AT&T building, which resulted in outage for several days, is still not fully restored, affecting parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama. And communication was hindered to 911 call centers, 20 of those, according to Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. But media coverage has been interesting, and so are how police people who were, 6 police officers braved themselves, going around knocking doors, getting people out of the harm's way. So one of the things in media is not a major news. It's no longer a headline or even on the first pages. And so far, no one has called it a terrorism. Actually, police has gone all the way in explaining that there were no killing. But there are incidents where a whole lot of killing takes place, which are not called an incident of terrorism. So there are not many speculations either. We do not know anything about the person, except authorities has named him to be Tony Warner, an IT guy. No one is comparing with the Oklahoma bombing, which was also in southern states. New York Times headlines were quite interesting for me. It says, a Nashville explosion. Another one say a quiet life, a thunderous death, and a nightmare that shook Nashville. I find a social media post very interesting. They had this New York Times post who says a quiet life, a thunderous death, and a nightmare that shook Nashville. They cross it out and provided an alternate heading. An American terrorist targets Nashville on Christmas. Of course, that was just for that person. To discuss all of these things with us are some people who have been speaking out on terrorism, have studied violence and hate crimes. So we have with us Professor Brian Levin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Brian Levin is a criminologist and a founding director of Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University. We also have with us Sabina Mohyuddin. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you for having me.
She's executive director of American Muslim Advisory Council at Tennessee, joining us, of course, from Nashville, Tennessee. We have with us Masood Akhtar. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thanks for inviting me as well.
Masood Akhtar is president and founder of We Are Many United Against Hate. And coming to us from Wisconsin, and close to Wisconsin is Rockford, Illinois. We're on a Christmas day. A Green Beret active duty soldiers murdered 3 people and injured 3 others. And of course, he's being described as mental health issues. So, Sabina, how is the situation in Nashville now? It's people little calm and collected with such extraordinary bomb blast?
Well, if you look at the devastation on 2nd Avenue, and this is, downtown Nashville, historic district, you still it's unbelievable, what happened there. This is a place where I've driven so many times going downtown, maybe to the mayor's office or to the council meetings. And, to think that it's in your city, something like this happened. At first the images were kind of from far away, a burning car. But as you got closer and you saw it, it looked like a war zone. And words matter, right? We know that. And, on the morning, on Christmas morning, it happened early in the morning. So I had an alert on my phone saying there was an explosion downtown. And then, 2 hours later, I got a text from a local imam, mosque leader, who asked me, do we need to send out a statement? And I think as Muslims, we all know the feeling. Like anything happens, we cringe. What's going to happen? What's going to happen if this person, God forbid, is a Muslim? What's going to happen to our community? And as head of an organization that really deals with these issues, attacks on our community and Islamophobia, I have to be on top of how do we react. But it was too early, and I'm tired of always trying to be on the defensive, and we needed to get more information. Now, early on, they kept saying it was an intentional act, and then we all know if there was any inkling that it was a Muslim or Middle Eastern or person of color, they would not be using intentional act. The word terrorism would have been front and center. And then as the day went on and they were saying they're looking for an RV, well, that was another kind of giveaway because not many Muslims around the area owns an RV. And so, as time went on and they're calling it intentional act, the next day the mayor used the word to describe it as a crime, which again, another word that sticks out as not being tied to a Muslim or, terrorism in that sense. And then the word over and over used again, explosion, not calling it a bomb, calling it an explosion. Well, explosion could be a gas leak that causes an explosion. So, throughout the day, the next day, all those little hints told you that it wasn't Muslim. And, it's terrible to say, but for a Muslim, there's a sigh of relief. It's like a collective sigh of relief in the community, like, oh, I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to deal with the backlash and what would happen if it was a Muslim. But still, the devastation to our community, this suicide bomber terrorist, he was going after infrastructure with the AT&T transmission building. And that's significant. And that, should scare us, should scare everyone.
Professor Levin, there must be some professors involved in coining the term intentional act. I haven't heard that lately, intentional act.
I think the most egregious, though, example of the kind of cultural bias and political bias that exists, if you remember a few years ago, a horrible attack that killed about 6 people on a mosque in Quebec. And someone who worked in this administration, I don't even want to say his name, he's got a radio show even now, disgracefully said that it was a false flag operation kind of thing. So we have a combination of things at work. One is law enforcement oftentimes does not want to say anything about anything that happens. On top of that, we have a structure that deals with terrorism on an international footing, but not on a domestic one. Additionally, Muslims in the United States, unfortunately, are the most negatively regarded religious group socio-politically. And what is so interesting is I think that there are plenty of legitimate reasons why certain terms can be used. In other words, we don't have a domestic terrorism statute, for instance, and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, I think is not so much what an investigator might say, because they're always tight-lipped. I think what would the certain subcultures, media, and political figures would be doing or saying if possibly a Muslim person were involved. And that's really what I think that is a difficult thing here, because we could even change structurally how we investigate, how authorities label things. But unfortunately, we have had years and years of Islamophobic rhetoric in the United States where we don't hear about Muslims who are involved in healthcare and emergency medicine who are probably treating many folks either in COVID or with regard to terror attacks as well.
It's not, thank you so much for mentioning that, Professor. It's not probably. In New York, according to survey, 9% of all physicians saving lives are Muslims. And many of them have died also. The couple of people who invented vaccine in Germany are Muslims.
Yep.
President Trump's czar on Operation Warp Speed is a Muslim. So those things, of course, don't come out. Masood, what do you think about? Are you in support of this this peculiar term, which is intentional act? I mean, this seems to be a should be the term which should describe all crimes in the country.
Well, intentional act applies to everybody. But the problem that I have being a Muslim is that you started out by saying you don't see much in the news in the mainstream media. My response to that is very simple. In this case, shooter is not a Muslim. End of that story. Because if this shooter that you're talking about in Tennessee, instead of Anthony Warner, if his name was Muhammad, then you will see all mainstream media doing three things at the same time, including some kind of tweet from the White House that you haven't seen yet on this guy. And that will be terrorism. Nobody is going to say, I'm going to evaluate this guy mental illness, problems, family issues. You don't see that.
Yeah, our president is the biggest defender of Christmas. So he should have tweeted as a defender of Christmas,
They just don't. That's the end of that story. But it does not stop there at the word terrorism. It goes one step above and call that as Muslim terrorism. And even that does not stop there. It goes further to say Islamic terrorism. That's where the Muslims who are law-abiding living in this country have a problem, because now you are associating that act with our religion, which is a religion of peace. What happens as a result of that, safety of those 3.6 million people living in this country who are doing a great job, like Professor Brian said right now, we are in military. We're doing all of these things about COVID-19. We're everywhere. But yet that picture is not shown. And I think that's where we are really struggling and reaching out to the general public. And particularly when I started the movement for We Are Many United Against Hate, it started in response to a call from the White House back in 2016, that there was a discussion in the White House between Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and Jeff Sessions to start a Muslim registry in United States. I heard that before. That started in Germany. Hitler started that. So my response when I was on television responded by saying, look, I came from India 35 years ago. My background is business. And I gave up my Indian citizenship based on what this country offers. So what I'm going to do on your show, I'm going to actually start a movement. I like the idea of starting a registry, but I'm going to start a movement and call this as anti-hate registry to bring people together regardless of their religion, ethnicity, or even political affiliation.
So that was your intentional act, I must say. By the way, I have the domain name Muslim Registry, if you like to have that. You're watching Muslim Network TV, and we're talking about the Christmas bombing, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and with me are three persons, quite thoughtful: Professor Brian Levin, Sabina Mohyuddin, who is a spokesperson for the Nashville Muslim community, and Masood Akhtar. So intentional act instead of terrorism, but then suicide bombing. It was suicide bombing. Or suicide bombing also is connected with not with the Japanese, not with the Tamil in Sri Lanka, but it must
be. It was in Sri Lanka.
So why has anybody used the term, police officers, governor, calling it a suicide bombing?
That word has been used, but in this conversation, you realize the narrative matters. Technicalities is not the point here. It is being able to cast suspicion on a whole community, on the Muslim community, when you use the words like terrorism, and it's what happens afterwards. It is the policies that come through, right? In 2017, an immigrant with allegiance to ISIS rented a truck and went through Lower Manhattan, right? And at that time, President Trump immediately tweeted about it, using language like terrorist attack, God and your country are with you, and then justifying extreme vetting, justifying different policies that are upheld to marginalize our communities, keep us under scrutiny. But of course, Trump has barely said a word about what has happened in Nashville, because this word terrorist attack is not out there. It wasn't perpetrated by Muslims, so it doesn't matter to him. He hasn't even come and visited Nashville, and so the rest of the country, it drops off the news, right? It drops off the news, and it's just this narrative that is used to marginalize our community, to put us on the defensive, to make us ask the question, people asking in media, and this is about the media, ask what is wrong with Islam, or Islam needs to be reformed. Islam is inherently violent. Nobody asked this. Nobody asked where Anthony Warner went to church. we know that question would have come up right away had it been a Muslim. What church they would have come down on all the mosques, asking what did he do, what did he believe in, and things like that. And really, it is Islam gets put in the hot seat. Islam is under scrutiny, and then again, it feels like we start from ground zero, from point zero, in trying to explain what Muslims are about and what Islam is about. But I have to say, like with this incident, we have brought up in Nashville, and Councilwoman Zulfa Tsuera, she posted on Twitter and on Facebook about the double standards on how we're treating, Anthony Warner versus if he had been Muslim. And I'm really heartened by, in Nashville, a lot of people see that double standard. They're seeing it, and it's about time.
So Professor Levin, who controls what will be called what?
Great question. And it's so interesting because we have different wheels working here. I'm former law enforcement, and I can tell you, even when the attack occurred in San Bernardino, there was a delay of a few days before the FBI labeled it terrorism. So we have certain things that are built into the system. But you know what? You can go on for an hour about that. How folks want to look for motive and casualties, and there's a system by which international terrorism is treated different. But I'll tell you something. That all may be true, but we have a bias in this country, as the social science data shows, with respect to Muslim people, unfortunately. And that's why our center has been very much involved, in particular, with this studying and analyzing Islamophobia. And what I think is so interesting is it's not, we throw around different words like intentional, but I want to throw out another legal word, if I could put on my legal hat here for a second, and that is presumption. We make presumptions with respect to Muslim folks that we don't make with regard to other folks. So when I went on Bill Maher's show, when the Boston Marathon bombing took place, and told him I thought he was an Islamophobe, I tried to tell him.
You should have qualified it liberal Islamophobe.
Well, that doesn't make it any better. Oh yeah, and interestingly enough, I said, and the tape's out there somewhere, there are wacky people of all stripes, and look at the history of religion. Look at the last half century. It didn't faze him one bit. But nevertheless, what we've seen in our research, for instance, as Daesh has been less effective, we saw a decline in extremist homicides, a cratering of extremist homicides by Muslim people in the United States. What happened, though, instead? We saw a flip where white supremacist far-right homicides just rocketed, and we begged. We begged Congress to hold hearings. So there was a whole bunch of stuff going on here which was improper. And that is that threat matrices change. And if you were to ask me, as people did 5 years ago, where the biggest threats were coming from, the answer would have been different from what it is today. We have a globalized threat with cells around the world and do-it-yourselfers and loners who are inspired by the web. And you know what? They're white supremacists. There is a global white supremacy movement. And I have no problem if people want to talk about all kinds of religious and political extremists. But please don't act like you have a PhD in things, public, media, or pundits. when you use differing standards. It's just that simple. And the bottom line is, while we have a diverse set of threats facing the United States, including one that's a wild card threat too, that doesn't fit in a box, that's a problem. And so unfortunately what we have is we have a system that's kind of structured in a certain way where we have to be careful of labeling certain things as terrorism just because it has some international component to an international group. But what if it's extremism that's international but more diffuse? So there are a variety of moving parts here, and you know who gets squished in them? Our Muslim brothers and sisters, right? Yeah. Because we don't call, we'll leave skid marks on the pavement to call Muslims terrorists, but we do not socioculturally do that with respect to other groups in the same way. And that's an unfortunate thing that we have to battle. Look, I haven't heard any of my Muslim friends or colleagues say that Daesh is a good thing or isn't a terrorist movement. But by the same token, why do we have, for instance, an administration where the president says Islam hates us, and when we had a horrendous set of mosque massacres online in New Zealand, he dismissed it. He said it's a small smattering of people. I put it in my Time magazine column. It's disgraceful. And what we will see is the bully pulpit has an effect. I'm going to close up this real quick, but I think it's important. After 9/11, we had a peak in those months, September and October, for hate crime in the United States. And anti-Muslim hate crimes rose significantly. We had 481 that year. And most of them were in those 2 months. However, we also saw attacks against Sikhs. We also saw attacks against, listen to this, ethnic non-Latino. You know what that is? Arab. We saw more of those hate crimes. What happened 6 days later? President George Bush, for anything you want to say about him, we're a nonpartisan entity. But the data tells a story. 6 days later at the Islamic Center of DC, he says Islam is peace, which it is. And by the way, we are going to invite you to have an international figure that our center is giving a Lifetime Achievement Award for Peace, who is Muslim, but I don't want to give that away today. But that's coming up after the new year. He spoke of tolerance, and what a disgrace it was that in the United States, religious freedom is under attack, as women in hijabs could not go out without being harassed and intimidated. Hate crimes dropped precipitously the next day, and they dropped precipitously into the next year. Flip it over, the attack that you referenced on our community. By the way, Muslim people of goodwill in our community did so many wonderful things after that terrorist attack. And we came together as a community. We didn't have a single hate crime, anti-Muslim hate crime in the city of San Bernardino. However, nationally wasn't the same story. President Bush, candidate Trump, 5 days later, did his horrific Muslim ban proposal. Hate crimes rose against Muslims another 23% on top of the spike that came after the terror attacks. So we saw a 6 day message, 6 days after the catalytic event, hate crimes dropped. Again, what did we see? 5 days after the San Bernardino attack, hate crimes went up even more. Words matter, the bully pulpit matters.
So the correlation which you're establishing is that the political leadership matters on these issues.
Yes.
What direction they are giving probably is then get broadcasted all over, and people are discouraged or encouraged. Whether you're giving them a message of stand back and stand by, or you're giving them who in the world are you, and officers need to check these things. So,
Imam, just one quick thing. those stand by thugs. And I do research. We don't just sit in an ivory tower. I went to these anti-Muslim rallies and saw these thugs. The Proud Boys are hardcore Islamophobes, as well as being misogynists. So it's very interesting how people will find moral and cultural flaws where they want to, but they're blind when it exists in their own backyard.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid talking with Professor Levin and Masood Akhtar, as well as Sabina Mohyuddin, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. Masood Akhtar, I mean, you mentioned that how perturbed you are, how things are being defined. I mean, this guy who in Rockford, Green Beret, I mean, active duty officer, murdered 3 people and all that. But, this thing happened on a larger scale in 2017. In Las Vegas, 58 people were massacred and injured 422. But, the news fizzled out. Nobody called him a terrorist and terrorist act. Or in 2018, as you know, that in Pittsburgh, I happened to visit that synagogue. 11 people were murdered, and it was just labeled a hate crime. I mean, the impact is, terrorizing the whole people. And so has your organization focused on this fact that why mass shootings are not by and large considered an act of terrorism, and why people immediately go to, okay, it must be mental health issue. It may be, but impact is it terrorize the whole people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a major problem, and so we have very active program as a part of our movement. We are many United Against Hate. One of them is a nonpartisan policies, because we are a nonprofit organization. And what we are trying to do is two-pronged approach. One is educational, because our message to our elected officials of both parties is that hate is not a Republican issue. Hate is not a Democrat issue. It's a human issue, and lives are being lost for no reason. So whenever there is an attack, regardless of who the shooter is, they should immediately condemn that kind of attack, as Professor Levin was talking about. And both parties should come forward and do it right away, the strongest way possible. That to me is the first step. The way I'm taking this through my organization with my board, the 30 of those representing different communities, is our intent is to empower youth, our students. So if you look at it, we have our students from high school, from colleges on our Students Ambassador Board. And we are reaching out to schools, communities together. And these students are going to reach out to these elected officials and talk with them, regardless of whether they are white, brown, or black, because I believe that it's more important not to pay too much attention to, red America or brown America or blue America. Focus on youth America, because that's how you're going to make a big change. It's a grassroots kind of thing. It is so disappointing to me that after 9/11, more people have been killed in United States by white supremacists compared to any other hate group in this country. And yet, FBI is saying we are investigating them, but they can't prosecute them the same way they prosecute foreign terrorists. There is a basic issue right there. I can give you a very quick example of this. 2 years ago, right where my business office is, there was a shooting. I was in the office, it was lunchtime. And one of my employees came to me and said, Masood, did you hear that there was a shooting next door? And I said, no. And then I said, but I have to tell you something. I'm not going to get out of this building until I find out who the shooter is. And he said, why is that? I said, well, if shooter is a Muslim, and if I go out, I'm concerned about the safety. Because people might think, oh, Islam teaches hate. These are terrorists. These are people who are doing it. And he said, wow, really? I didn't realize. I said, yeah. So that's the kind of environment of fear and hate that Muslims are living here. So one of our responsibility as Muslims is to reach out to all of these other people that we work with who believe that we are just like them. And really get their support on our side. We also have to reach out to local media. We have very good relationship with local media here. They always work with us, and they always go on television and call these guys as terrorists when this thing happens. They're not hesitant. I think the problem is the mainstream media, where there are reports that if shooter is a Muslim, they keep repeating 7 times more that incidents than if a shooter is not a Muslim. So I think everybody has a role to play into this to build an inclusive community. And what's surprising about the Rockford incidents, actually, I was with my family in my car and my son, went to Chicago that night, drop off my niece, she was going to Dubai. And when we were returning, we passed Rockford at the same time when this incident happened. And I was talking to my son in the back, say, can we stop by here and have dinner? And somehow the restaurant was closed. Well, I lucked out, didn't go there anyway. So, I mean, this is a terrorizing environment of fear and confusion that has been created.
So Sabina, his thought is reaching out to media. And I don't think America is going to talk about it. I mean, it's already out of the major news. There's nothing new about it. Yeah. Most media coverage is 24-hour older, or actually 3-day or 2-day older. You're in Nashville. Probably it will stay in Nashville news at least for a few more days. So are you, the type of conversation we're having right here, Professor Levin and yourself and Masood Akhtar, what about, taking this conversation to in an op-ed, making it why it is not being called suicide bombing, why this term is so benign, intentional act, and why the devastation of a historic district and suspension of the services to 3 states, a good part of the AT&T network, is taken so lightly, and juxtaposing it with what it might be like.
No. So, so I've worked with Council Member Zulfat Suero, who's also a board member of the American Muslim Advisory, and she's posted it publicly. Right now, I'm a Nashvilleian. This is raw. This is our downtown that is destroyed. And this is a conversation to be had, but I think it's also, there needs to be time to grieve. These are businesses, 41 businesses that have been destroyed, that were already suffering due to the pandemic. For me, it's about the long run. it's about the relationships we've been building over the years. And I think it was 2015. Then we came up with a full page ad in the Tennessean called The Power of Nashville, working with our allies across Nashville, saying that we are going to stand up to hate. This coalition has come to our side on a number of occasions. And so in early 2018, there was going to be a security summit at a local university. And we actually activated that group of supporters and say, hey, we want you to take the lead to push back, because this security summit had a lot of Islamophobes that were invited. And they did it. They pushed back. We stopped that. And then this summer, if you heard about it, the Tennessean, the major newspaper in Nashville, on June 21st, published an ad by some religious group in Arkansas saying that Islam, literally it says, Islam is going to detonate a nuclear bomb in Nashville. And so again, we went to our allies. We had over 700 people sign on a letter against hate, against that kind of misinformation. And these were from the vice mayor, congressmen, church leaders, rabbis. I mean, it was an impressive group of individuals who came up and said, no, we will not tolerate this. And again, we did it again with a letter to our state legislator who appointed an anti-Muslim bigot to the textbook commission in Tennessee. So that is the long game. You know, it is the allies we build and how we educate them on these issues and how people are aware. And just seeing more people, individuals, not necessarily coming from Muslims, individuals seeing the double standard here and how this is being covered, I think that really gives me a lot of hope that we are making headway and we will be changing this conversation.
How many Muslims are there in Tennessee?
In Tennessee, across the state, about 65,000. In Middle Tennessee, it would be about 40,000.
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming Nashville is middle Tennessee.
Yeah, Nashville, and then you have Williamson County, and then Murfreesboro. So that's kind of the surrounding area.
How many mosques in that area?
There are 10 mosques, and we are a very diverse community. We have the largest Kurdish community in the U.S. Here in Nashville, so 15 to 20,000. And then we have a large Somali community, and then just from around the world. It is a very diverse community.
So as we're coming to conclusion, terrorism, whether it's white nationalist led terrorizing and murder, or it's motivated by any ISIS ideology, as it was accused of, in San Bernardino incident exactly 5 years ago. I think it was December 2015. Yeah, it was December 2015. News comes, or whether they're beating up Muslims or whitewashing white nationalism or whatever goes on, it just happened for a few days or so, and then it builds on it. I mean, it's building on continuously on Muslims way before 9/11 and all that. There is a historic things, but America is moving forward. I mean, work of all three of you contributes to people understanding each other better. But these incidents come and go, public labeling, whether it's a intentional act or a terrorist act, all fades away. But what as a society are we learning from it? I mean, we have a new administration coming in, and although with Masood Akhtar is very declaredly non-partisan in his effort to get both parties realize hate is hate. I would like to know, Professor Levin, since you have this Study of Hate and Extremism Center. What exactly in American narrative you like to see changed? And I like each one of you then take a minute to say what are your hope the next administration should be doing in this regard.
First, we have to counter there's an industry of Islamophobia in the United States. I mean, if we had a similar industry with regard to other faiths, there would be investigations on Dateline and 60 Minutes, and we'd have all this kind of tracing the anti-Muslim network. But you know what? There is one, and it's a disgrace. And it's given succor by concentric circles of people who may be shallow bigots, but realize that they can make social or political hay from it. And the fact of the matter is, I think what we have to do, and I want your viewers to know that we will be indefatigable in countering this scourge of Islamophobia for as long as I'm running this center. And we have some of the most sophisticated research on this stuff that goes to day-by-day ticks. Give you an example. This hate is not just in a little concentric ball that's just limited to Muslims. It attacks the nature of what our country is about, religious pluralism, and it undermines the good deeds and civic achievements that are illustrated with everyone on this panel other than me, who are doing great things. And in Tennessee, where they can't even build a mosque without this fire hose of prejudice that comes out with conspiracism and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I think we have to do two things. One, make it not okay to be an Islamophobe, to call it out. Even if someone's a big star, you call it out. Also, identify what this industry is and who benefits from it, and to attack those, particularly those who are at the highest levels that promote this. The President of the United States, we can show day-by-day ticks. Give an example. Last year, and how it metastasizes. Last year, the two worst days for hate crime in 2019 was when the impeachment stuff was announced by Speaker Pelosi. The second worst day, and interestingly enough, it wasn't even it didn't even result in the highest day for anti-Muslim. But the tied for the second worst day was when the president went on a rant against Congressperson Omar and the squad and told people to go back where they came from. So what we see is, while we certainly have Islamophobia, it is intertwined with xenophobia, Arabophobia, and a variety of other things as well. So we have to step up our civic dialogue. Universities have to be a part of this, and we are going to be doing great things with that. We'll probably be asking some of you guys to come over and do some stuff with us. But also, we must make it not okay for those who are coalescing this into a socio-cultural movement, which is now not just segregated to clan bigots, but to business people, to politicians, and to entertainers. We can't let them get away with it. We have to have a social cost to it, but we also have to have a civic dialogue where people learn that, hey, guess what? Islam's an Abrahamic faith, and that Moses is the most mentioned in the Quran. We have such ignorance, and that ignorance is tied to fear, and that fear is then exploited by a whole bunch of grifters. And that's what we have to make not okay. Education and going after those whose indefatigable bigotry does not meet with condemnation.
Thank you. So, Masood, what are your expectations? You have half a minute with Biden administration.
I think my organization will continue focusing on engagement, because sitting down and talking to people and explaining what we stand for makes a big difference. So we'll continue the educational side of it.
Okay, Sabina, what your expectations? If Biden is listening to you, what you like him to do?
He has to be forceful in his words, and again, what Professor Levin said, calling out Islamophobia where it is, even when it's coming from the Democratic Party, and that's important. It has to be a strong message from top that this will not be tolerated. We're not going in that direction. If it's not, then I don't have much hope. Things will just continue as they are. It has to come from leadership.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Brian Levin, Sabina Mohyuddin, and Masood Akhtar. Thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate. And thank you for watching this conversation. And thank you, Sher Dil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid, for producing today's show. You have been watching Muslim Network TV. Stay tuned for other programming. We're there 24/7. We're on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, or you can download our app and we'll always be with you. So download it, just look for iPhone or Android Muslim Network TV, and that's our app, free of charge. Or you can go on muslimnetwork.tv, our website. Peace. Salam.